Good morning, Illini, and welcome back. We are back with another Healthy Illini podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schrock, and we're in the summer. It is hot here right now, but hopefully you're out and enjoying that weather, enjoying the sunshine, enjoying the opportunity to get out and be active. And that's actually what we're going to talk about today, some tips on some things to do there when it comes to food and comes to preparing and things like that. So we're going to jump right into it. I'm joined today by our guest, Bri Whitted. She is a nutritionist here at McKinley Health Center in the Health Ed department. Bri has been on the program before, so Bri, thanks for coming back.
You're welcome.
Now, as I said, summer is in full swing, and there's a lot of us getting outdoors, enjoying that, planning activities. And for me, most of my favorite activities, no matter what time of year, involve food. And summer is no different on that. So I do love cooking and grilling. I love a good picnic or a cookout with friends and family when we all gather somewhere. But those activities actually do come with a little risk and the need for some awareness, as I understand it. So how can a picnic have any danger to it?
Yeah, there are a lot of opportunities in the summer for outdoor fun with family and friends. But with the warm temperatures, warm weather, there's always the opportunity for foodborne bacteria to thrive when you take it outdoors in those hot temperatures, which can often lead to foodborne illness. And so to make sure we keep everyone safe when eating outdoors in these warm weather months, safe food handling is critical. Making sure that we're cooking our food properly, not cross-contaminating it, and making sure that we're cooling our foods and keeping them cool.
So there is that potential danger there with the foodborne bacteria, and it's something to be aware of, but you can actually avoid it pretty easily with some simple forethought on some things. So let's start with before the event begins, whether it's a picnic or a gathering, a potluck kind of thing, or whatever it may be. If you're eating outdoors, what are some of the key ideas to keep in mind when you're prepping for that outdoor meal?
I think one of the main things is to make sure that you're well prepared before you leave home. So if you're taking any type of produce, make sure that you clean it before you leave home, rinse it under running tap water before you pack it in the cooler. And then be sure not to cross-contaminate like your raw meats, raw foods with your raw veggies. Be sure to keep like your meat, your poultry, seafood, anything that you're potentially going to grill at the event, separate from your raw foods or your other foods that are already cooked. Make sure that you have proper containers to transport the food in. If it does contain raw meat that might have juices, make sure that they're securely tightened so that you don't potentially have juices running all over everything. Make sure that you're keeping your cold foods cold. So a good idea might be to put a fridge thermometer in your cooler so that you can kind of be sure that you keep an eye on what the temperature inside that cooler might be. Ideally, we want cold foods to stay at or below 40 degrees Fahrenheit on that temperature gauge. Another good idea is to try to keep your coolers closed as much as possible. So it might be a good idea to take two separate coolers, one that you might have your food in, one that you might have your drinks and things that you're going to be opening and reopening frequently, and so that you don't open your food containers quite as frequently.
You were talking, before we started, we were talking about there's some creative ideas when it comes to keeping things cool, and you had seen one that somebody had done with ice, with a bowl. We're going to touch on that a little bit, because you can be real creative in how you do those cooling techniques.
Yeah, so we just had an event this weekend for the 4th of July, and it was a friend had filled a shallow pan with ice and froze it, and then put their bowl inside of their bowl that had the food in it. I've also seen people use inflatable children's pools, and they fill those with ice. Of course, you'll have to replace the ice as it melts if it's sitting out there for a while, but that's a good way to kind of make sure that your food that you want to stay cool kind of stays in ice.
It's basically the salad bar idea. If you go to any restaurant that has a salad bar, they usually have a container with whatever, vegetables or salads or whatever in it, but it's packed in a basin of ice.
Yeah.
And so you can take that same restaurant idea and move it to your event on a smaller scale, obviously. Things like, taking your cooler and making sure that you have it packed with ice and then pack everything in that ice. those kinds of things that we don't always think about in the moment, but it can save a lot of hassle later and save a lot of concern later when you're trying to keep things as cold as you would like them.
Yeah, exactly.
And so going back to the cooler, it also makes sense to be intentional in how you pack it, how you organize your cooler. If you want to share on that just a little bit, like how do you prepare? Like, you don't just throw everything into a cooler, but you're actually thinking about how things would fit and what needs to be where with the ice.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have two separate coolers to take beverages in one and food in another, maybe you pack your items that you aren't going to use, as close to the beginning, maybe closer to the bottom, depending on how often you think you're going to anticipate like opening and closing that cooler.
If I'm taking food that I'm going to grill, and if I'm only walking, outside or whatever, then you don't have to worry too much about how long it's going to be out before you start cooking it. But if I'm driving long distance and you need the meat, is it better to keep it in a cooler and keep it there? Or you want room temperature when you get there? What's the best way to prepare that, have that grill meat ready when you do get to wherever you're going to cook it?
Yeah, so sometimes you could even have it still like a little bit frozen if you anticipate that it's going to be a while, like that you are driving a ways. You don't really want your meat to thaw at room temperature. Like, it's best for it to thaw like in water, like cold running water, or to thaw like in refrigeration. So I wouldn't take it out of the cooler and set it out in the heat at any time.
Okay, so now you've gotten your food prepared, you're ready to go, you're packed up, you're loaded up, or you're walking outside or wherever you're going for your picnic or cookout. But once you get to the site, there's some things you can do there as well. Just preparing is not the end of your being careful when it comes to taking care of your food. So, and sometimes when you get to those areas, the excitement of seeing people and the excitement of being there, you kind of just, everything else goes out the window. You're just having fun. But when you're at the site, when you arrive, what kinds of tips do you need to be aware of in order to make sure you maintain your safety?
Well, back to the coolers, I would find somewhere shady that you could set your cooler in, because it's likely to stay a little cooler if it's not in the like exposed sunlight. But food safety always begins with like proper hand hygiene and like proper surface cleaning. So making sure that you have hand sanitizer, like you take soap with you. If you don't think you have running water, like take a water jug with you so that you can potentially wash your hands. Take paper towels so that you aren't using the same towels over and over. You can just throw those away. Antibacterial wipes that you can wipe down the table. Take tablecloths that you can kind of cover the surface with. Antibacterial wipes can then be used like to wash off the tablecloth. You want to make sure that your surface is clean before you get the food out to prep it, and then after you prep the food, that you're washing that surface down so that before you get your food out to eat on, your surface is clean.
That tablecloth is really an important one, especially if you're going somewhere like a park, because it's really hard to use antibacterial wipes on a wooden park, on a wooden park table that's got some splintering to it and things like that. And there have been times where I've been there and I'm like, oh, I forgot the tablecloth, and it's just so frustrating. So that's an easy one. Pick one up and just throw that on the table. Yeah.
Make sure you pack a garbage bag so you can throw those wipes away, because I feel like that's always us. Like, we're like, what do we do with all this garbage?
So you've gotten your table set, but now you're setting things out. How do you keep those, the containers? How do you maintain those and the things you're going to use to eat? What should you do to keep those safe and keep those clean?
I would always make sure that you take extra utensils and extra containers, because I know before we were talking kind of about things that our families didn't do as safely back before we didn't know, but a lot of people don't think to like use a clean platter. Like you put your raw meat on it and then you grill and then you put your raw meat back on it, which is like the biggest mistake you can make. So make sure that you take a clean platter if you don't have ability to like wash that platter in between. Same thing with utensils. Like you might drop them, you might touch the raw meat with them, and you want to make sure that you have extras so that you can keep from contaminating them.
speaking of the raw meat, so we've brought raw meat because we're going to grill it. We've grilled it, and we do have let's say we have a platter, so we can put it on a fresh platter, things like that. We've talked about keeping cold foods cold. How do I keep a hot food hot how do I keep track of that when I'm grilling? Because obviously I don't have a stove to stick it in or something like that. Is there anything that I can do to kind of make sure that I maintain that once it's grilled, the meat stays okay?
Yeah. So most of the time, I'm not the grill expert, but I've watched a lot of people do it. So you can move the meat kind of like away from the fire a little bit. Usually your fire is going to be like in the center of the grill, and usually you can kind of move the cooked meat that's done to the outer edge of the grill so that it's not over the direct heat, but it'll still stay warm. Foil is always a good thing. Wrapping your cooked meat in foil and then putting it like in a kind of secure, tightly contained container will help it to stay warm.
And if we do, this podcast is for anybody, but a lot of college students is what we're really aiming for here. And a lot of college students don't have super well-stocked utensils and things in their kitchen. If you're listening to this, you're like, well, what kind of container are you talking about? You can go get a foil pan for very inexpensive at a Dollar Tree, Dollar General, Walmart, Aldi, whatever. You can find those, and these are things that are great for storing meat. For after you've grilled it, you can throw some foil over the top, and so these are things that you can find fairly simply. But
yeah, I tell students a lot of times, like when I meet with them and they come to live in an apartment for the first time, like to go to places like Goodwill where people have kind of like turned in what they thought wasn't great utensils or pans and things like that anymore. So sometimes you can find inexpensive options there as well.
And sometimes it's not because they're no longer they've been well used. Sometimes somebody just wants to redo their kitchen, and change the look of it and change the style of it. So you can find some really, you're right, that's a great tip, because you can find some really nice stuff that someone else just didn't want anymore.
Yeah,
and especially when you're starting out. That actually, we're talking about tips that you've given students on as far as, stocking kitchens and things like that. That actually segues into the last point to close that I kind of wanted to touch on, because we're talking about food safety outdoors. But as a nutritionist, you work with a lot of students. Does food selection come into play as to when you're prepping for a picnic? Are there things that are more difficult to keep safe outdoors versus things that are easier to keep safe outdoors?
Well, I think we touched on one of the main ones, like meat is always going to be kind of a risk for cross-contamination, like potential for undercooking. A lot of bacteria will grow on like dairy items as well. So desserts that have cream cheese or, lots of raw, milk and things like that. Things that have a lot of mayonnaise in them. So a lot of times like a chicken salad, a potato salad, a tuna salad, those types of things are always going to be something you want to make sure that you have in that ice bath of some sort. Making sure that your meat is like cooked all the way through is a big thing too. So it might be a good idea to everyone's got a smartphone nowadays, but to have a temperature chart pulled up so that you make sure that you potentially have a meat thermometer with you as well and are checking to make sure that you cooked your meat to that proper temperature, because it's different for beef versus poultry versus pork. So that's a big one. But as far as picnicking ideas, I know myself and the other dietitian, Ashley, we have lots of recipes up our sleeve and different ideas that we love to pass on to individuals, whether you're looking for something that is vegetarian or, kind of significant to your culture or whatever it might be. We love to kind of help come up with ideas.
And I love when we get an opportunity to shed light on some of the things that you do in those realms, because for me, prior to working at McKinley, when I thought nutritionist, it was always diet. I'm trying to lose weight, it was that kind of thing. But that's a very small part of what you can help with as a nutritionist here at McKinley. There's a whole array of things, including planning and ideas and creativity. Because again, as college students, you tend to get in a rut because you think you can only afford certain things, and so you end up eating the same thing over and over because that's what you can afford and that's what you understand. So if somebody did want to expand their palate or had any questions about how do I prepare these things, or I'm just looking for ideas, they can reach out to you here at McKinley, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're hearing that, call the health ed department. We have our contact information in the episode description. You can always contact McKinley, and we're happy to point you in the direction of that. And Ashley and Bri are both fantastic about giving ideas, being creative, and are super encouraging in whatever you're trying to figure out. Very, very helpful. I've used them myself for a number of things with my family and my kids and sports and things like that. So if you're looking at an outdoor meal and you're just not sure where to start, by all means, give us a call and we'll be happy to get you there. Bri, I appreciate you being here today. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's summer and we like being outside. And for a lot of us, that includes at some point a picnic or a barbecue or some sort of gathering with food. And it's a lot of fun and it's a great activity, but you do want to be aware of the possibility of risk if you're not preparing food the way you should. And so being intentional in that will help out a lot. If you have any questions on that, if you have any dialogue you want to start, give us a call. Contact us at Healthy Illini, contact us at McKinley, send us an email. We'll be happy to continue that conversation with you, and be happy to put you in contact with somebody who can help you no matter what your question or concern may be. Thank you for joining us today. You are on a personal journey, no matter where you are in it. You are important. You matter. Your health and wellness are important and matter, and we are here to keep you well to excel. Go have a great week, Illini. Let us know how you're doing, and we will catch you next time on Healthy Illini.